What's good, Savages? Welcome to Blue Collar Sports. I'm your host, Savage Paulson, and with me today for this premiere episode of Blue Collar Sports is my good friend, Zach McGibbon. Zach, tell the people your background a little bit.
For sure. A lot of different things. Mainly been doing some sports commentary. I've been doing some sports commentary for the Trenton Golden Hawks in our region. It's a junior A hockey team, and I've been calling it for the last couple of years. I used to be a sports director at my college radio station, so I'd be in charge of all the programming. And at our station, we were also calling hockey. We were doing some football. And speaking of football, I've covered some of the Quincy Skyhawks, which is a local football team here. So different broadcasting backgrounds when it comes to covering sports and covering different local teams, and I've done some stuff for the OHL as well. So it's a lot of different things all wrapped up into one.
See, you just told the audience why I chose you to be on the premiere episode of Blue Collar Sports. You're kind of the resident expert. I'm kind of the fan's perspective, and I've known you for years, and I've known your background, and I couldn't have thought of anybody better to join me along for this adventure. Let's get right into it. College football. It's been crazy last couple of weeks. The first thing I want to talk about, we've seen a lot of football in the last couple of weeks. One thing that we saw that was different this year with college football was the 12-team format. What's your thought on the 12-team format? Do you think that it made the college football better, or do you think that the 4-team format that we had previously was better?
Well, it's funny because I was somebody that really, really championed the 12-team playoff, mainly because, with the talent that's coming through the systems in the States, from the high school system into colleges, and now you have everything going on with NIL and everything going on there. I've always felt like that an expansion from the 4 teams to the 12 teams was perfect. I know there's been a lot of discussion where, there was even some pushback to the 4 team at that time because they wanted to make sure that the games during the season mattered, and that, number 1 and number 2 would face off against each other. Then you'd have the different bowls, like the Rose Bowl, where try to compete for the championship game, or the
Right.
Citrus Bowl or the Orange Bowl. So you get all these different, there's always going to be pushback to change when it comes to this stuff, and especially with the way that college football is, the way it's been expanding. So I was all for the 12-team playoff. Last year we saw with Florida State that controversy there, where Florida State felt like they should have been in the playoff, and there was the whole deal with Jordan Travis, their quarterback there, who got injured, and
Right.
there was questions on was this Florida State team legit. And so now I think with this 12-team playoff, I think there's no more excuses. I think you've got some good teams that are in there. So as of the playoff now, I've been catching a couple of games when I can. It's not been amazing football to start off,
Right.
but I think people are being naive to the fact that, we got to go back to the previous system. Like, look at all these bad games we're getting. It's like, remember a couple of years ago when I believe it was Georgia and TCU in the final, and Georgia
Right.
put up like 50 points. It's like, that was part of the previous system too, right?
Right.
So I think it's going to take some time for, this playoff system to be implemented. Again, we'll see more what NIL will bring. Like, this is not the final form of college football, right? There is still going to be many more iterations, still trying to figure out NIL, how these player deals will work, and how these conference realignments. That's always going to be top of mind for a lot of people. So I think we're really going to see how this 12-team playoff will look in the next couple of years when more teams start to, set their NIL budgets and have much more depth. But I will say, I thought that Texas-Arizona State game was a lot of fun. I watched that game live, and the double overtime was a lot of fun. But again, I don't think the games have been blow away, but I think it's going to take some time to really see the full impact of this 12-team playoff system.
I'll tell you from a fan's perspective of someone that hasn't really been following college football for that long. Obviously, I'm a huge football fan for many, many years, but college football was never anything I really got into it until a few years ago, where I started paying attention. And this year I paid a lot more attention, and especially with the 12-team format. So I'll tell you what I examined as my perspective from watching the football. One of the things that I loved about the 12-team format is that we get to see home playoff games for, I believe, the first time in ever or in a very long time. So
Yeah.
that adds to the excitement. So even if you have certain teams that you're like, I'm not sure about watching, name the, some lower ranked team in the playoffs and you're expecting a stinker, I still think that having the effect of the home game, the atmosphere, I was a big fan of that. One thing I didn't really enjoy, well, I guess it's not really up to me, but I didn't think it was fair for a team like Oregon that had gone 13-0, and the first serious team they had to face in the playoff was Ohio State. That, let's face it, Ohio State was ranked 6, I believe. Is it?
I think 5th or 6th. Yeah.
Right. But Ohio State has been there before. They're a playoff team. Their defense is just crazy, crazy defense. And so for the Ducks, you're like going like, yeah, you had a great season, 13-0, number 1 seed. You're like, yeah. And then boom, you get the first half was horrible for the Oregon. They didn't play well at all. Very soft, missed tackle. It wasn't what I had seen from previous games from them. So they woke up a little bit maybe in the end of the game towards the second half, I believe. To be honest, I kind of zoned out after a while. I was like, I don't think they're coming back for this. But after that game, my pick to win it all was Ohio State. I was thinking of all the teams that are left right now, which is something that we can move on to the next subject. But yeah, I do enjoy the 12-team format. I think it gives the opportunity for more teams to get more exposure. And like you said, with the NIL, there's money involved now for these players, and it'll make things interesting for the future. Something you mentioned that I never thought of but it's absolutely the truth, is that this is not the final format. There will be modifications and other stuff to come. I think the 12-team format is a good start. I think it produced some bad games, but again, I think it gave the opportunity for certain teams to feel that playoff atmosphere and then to have that experience for their fan base and everything. So I like it for that perspective. The purist football fan might disagree and say, let's go back to the 14 format was better. Right. You get the best 4 teams all the time. You don't get Alabama losing in the it hurts because I don't really have a say in the game when it comes to college football. I kind of love certain teams, but I love Alabama. I've always liked, even all the way back to Nick Saban being there. They were a well-coached team. They were always a beast team. And now when I see them not make them to the Final Four, I'm always like, this doesn't sound like there's something wrong here. Like when I see Notre Dame, I'm not saying they're not deserving to be there, but it's, in one sense, I'm happy to see teams that you normally don't see there. But again, I miss sometimes having the juggernauts because you're going to get one hell of a game. So
for sure.
Right.
And you mentioned with some of the other teams as well, it was cool to see Boise State go in there.
Right.
With a Heisman, contender in Ashton Genty. Some people believe he should have been the Heisman Trophy winner this past season.
I believe so.
I wouldn't disagree, and it wasn't like he was bad in that game either. Obviously, it was the most high level competition he faced all year,
right?
And coming out of the MAC conference, it's not exactly it's not the most difficult conference as compared to the SEC or the Big Ten, right? But I like it because we can finally just say, look, how many times in years past have we heard from teams being like, we should have been in there? I think back to what's the team that Blake Bortles played for, the college team, and they had a really good record many years ago. It's a Florida team, and they joke that they should have been the national champions that year. It was Alabama that year, obviously, because it was Nick Saban's Alabama,
right?
But it was stuff like that. Now we can officially say, okay,
UCF.
They had their UCF,
yeah,
exactly. There you go. That was the college I was looking for. Finally we could say, this team, they had their opportunity. They faced off against some of the best, and this is what they were able to do.
Right.
And sometimes with football, obviously I'll bring it to the pro wrestling stuff because we're both familiar. We can't predetermine that sort of stuff.
Right.
The games will just go how they can. And sometimes teams just blow out other teams. And we've seen it in playoffs in other leagues as well. So it's something that we're still trying to figure out when it comes to this college football system. And, as we get closer and closer, we see more of these teams kind of narrowing down. I think we'll get better quality games because now we've got some good programs that are in there.
Right.
But it'll still take some time, and I firmly believe they'll make some tweaks. Like what you mentioned was a great point about with Oregon, because I also agree with you. That was just not fair to them.
Right.
Like, they should be rewarded for having a great season. And I know they faced Ohio State during the season as well, and like
they beat
barely
them.
And just barely beat. If it wasn't for Will Howard deciding I'm going to slide with 2 seconds left, they probably they might have lost the game. But yeah, I firmly believe I agree with you what you said there, that Oregon should have a better. They should have faced off against the number 12 team or whatnot, because I feel like that's just more fair. But they were trying to go for the conferences, right? And so
Right.
So it's still something that's being worked out.
Yeah, again, I'm happy about where we are right now, about the storylines coming along the Final Four teams. So again, I think for me it was a success, and I hope they can work from this format forward and tweak it to something that, it can be just better and better for college football. The next thing I'd like to discuss was just your quick thoughts on the Final Four teams. Is there a favorite that jumps out at you out of the 4 teams? Because I think for me, if I look at the Final Four teams, Texas, their defense is very strong. But they're going against another strong defense. And Iowa State just came at, they look like they have momentum behind them after, I think they lost big games during the season to Oregon, but they seem to have the momentum right now with the game against Oregon, the way they played. To me, Ohio State is the one that, if I had to pick one right now, thinking that's the team. But again, I'm looking at it from more of a fan's perspective correct me if I'm wrong, but every single team, the Final Four team, their strength seems to be their defense, like college football defense. Like everything I've read, Notre Dame's defense, they have some young players the cornerback, I forget his name there, but I read I believe is a sophomore, but really good kid. And from what I've read also, Texas defense is really strong. Yeah. Do you have anything that jumps out at you about the Final Four teams?
Yeah, I think whoever wins the matchup between Ohio State and Texas is my pick to win the championship. So I will say this, just in the interest of fairness, I'm somebody that cheers for the Longhorns. So this has been a really good season as a Longhorns fan. I've just been a Longhorns fan since Vince Young in the 2006 Rose Bowl against Matt Leinart and USC Trojans. So
right.
And I wouldn't say I'm like a hardcore fan. It's just like through my years of following college football, it's, Colt McCoy, Sam Ehlinger, and now obviously Quinn Ewers. You got Arch Manning as the backup. That offense for Texas looks really good. They've got one of the best tight ends in the country on their offense as well, and they've got some explosive wide receivers. To me, the question would be for the Longhorns is, can Quinn Ewers play at a high level against Ohio State, as you mentioned, because that defense is really good at Ohio State. And there's been a lot of talk about Quinn Ewers potentially being a first-round pick in the NFL. I personally don't see it, and I'm somebody that cheers for Texas. I think he's got the intangibles, obviously, and he could win you some games. We saw with the Arizona State game, like, Texas was losing it at one point, and frankly, there was that mistargeting call, in my opinion, in the Arizona State game, and then you obviously see with the kicker there, Brent Auburn, missing those field goals as well. It's if Texas could shore that up, because that was the weakest I've seen Texas look all year, and that was in the their first appearance in the playoff. So if they're able to shore that up against Ohio State, I think they have a chance. I look at the other end of the bracket, and Notre Dame has always been like one of those teams that they look great on paper. They're not part of a conference, and so they get these nice positions that they can beat these high level teams. But when the chips are down, they never seem to get over that hump. And finally get into the last time they were in the final was against Alabama, when it was the Manti Te'o led Notre Dame.
Right.
Irish. So this is a Notre Dame team. Like, they have consistently good programs, and I like their coach Marcus Freeman there as well. But it's funny between both of them, because a lot of that you could say about Penn State as well. Like Penn State, you mentioned with Ohio State, they had a couple of losses to some big name. Like you mentioned with the Oregon Ducks as well. But with Penn State, it seemed like they could beat the teams that they should beat. But as soon as they faced off against one of their divisional rivals in Ohio State or Michigan, they just never seemed to, click. And so this has obviously been one of their better seasons as a program in the last couple of years. I just don't trust Penn State. With Penn State, I have to see it to believe it with them,
Right.
that they could firmly be in that next level. So I see it being personally Notre Dame winning that game and then going to the final, and I could totally see it being an Ohio State Notre Dame, college football final. But to me, whoever wins the Ohio State Texas Longhorns game is going to be the winner of the championship, because I think both of those teams are really high quality, high level teams, and they have the chance to be the winners.
Yeah, I mean, you said it all. I think I'm going to keep my version a bit short and sweet because I kind of changed my mind now listening to you. My pick was Ohio State. I thought, like you, the winner between Texas and Ohio State was going to be the champions. You mentioned something that maybe changed my mind, is that I think Texas had a really bad game even though they won. That I can agree with, and I kind of forgot about that. And I think it was the type of game that'll give them an opportunity, a lot of tape on the things they need to fix to beat a team like Ohio State. I thought the momentum was coming along, but I think coaching staff, when you're getting down to 4 team, I think coaching is a huge factor, and there's big time coaches right now in the Final Four. I think Texas will be able to correct the ship and come in and really I'm not saying they're going to dominate. It's going to be a tight game, I think, but in the end, I think Texas will take it, and I think they'll go on to win the national championship. That's my pick right there.
I like it. Well, you're appealing to me, I can tell you that. I would love to see a Longhorns championship.
You convinced me. I was going to pick Ohio State. I was like, yeah, dude, honestly, though, if I had to pick with my heart, just being a fan, there's I think a nostalgia effect. I want Notre Dame. I want to see the Irish just go and win. I don't know why. It'll be like, when's the last time they won a championship? It's
been a while.
Right?
It's been a while.
Like 40s, 50s, is that possible? 60s?
I'm trying to remember if because it has been a while since they've been to the championship game, obviously a couple of times, but they're one of those teams that's kind of, they're one of those legacy teams, I guess is the best way to put it, where everybody kind of sits down. It's like, all right, we're going to watch some Notre Dame football here today. And that'll be a program that'll be interesting to watch too in the future, because right now, with the way that the college football playoff system is, because they're not part of a conference, they can't be 1 to 4. Because 1 to 4 is, all the conference champions.
Right.
And so the highest they could be is 5 if they had finished first in the regular season. So, there's been talks about them potentially joining, a conference, potentially the ACC or potentially the Big 12. It's funny to hear Notre Dame fans say how it's unfair that they're not number 1,
Right.
Well, then join a conference. Beat the teams in your conference and then you can be number 1. It shouldn't be that hard. Yeah, it's they're one of those institutions in college football. Like when you think the NCAA football, you think Notre Dame. So
they won, I think 1988 was their last championship, from what I could see.
Yeah, so it's been a while. It's been a while.
It's been a long time. I thought it was longer than that, to be honest. We'll move on from college football. Move on to the second thing I want to talk about, which is the race for the NFL MVP. The odds favorite right now is Josh Allen, and behind is Lamar Jackson. So those are the betting favorite. I have a very particular take on this. I think there should be more names to this list. I will name them, but I want to hear what your thoughts are on the NFL MVP race. And if I'm curious to know how you define, if you had to pick, what would be your criteria to determine who the MVP gets to be?
Yeah, when it comes to the MVP, that's always been, a bit of a hot button because of the scoring, because it's mostly a quarterback award at this stage.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, you get a running back that might sneak in. I can't think of a wide receiver that was even in contention, like maybe Randy Moss many years ago. And
I think Cooper Kupp a few years ago when he had the Triple Crown, right?
That's
think
right.
He was everybody knew he wasn't going to win, but they mentioned he was kind of you know what I mean?
I look at it similarly to a Heisman Trophy, where it's always going to be the skill positions. So you're always going to get quarterbacks should be number one. They're always going to look at quarterback. And then if it's not quarterback, then it's either going to be running back, wide receiver. And if the only reason why they would look at defensive back is if you're also a dual threat and you are also a wide receiver, which is what we saw with Travis Hunter this past year with the Buffaloes. And so, unless you're Lawrence Taylor, who won it one year because you're Lawrence Taylor and you're the greatest defensive player of all time,
100%.
It's going to be tough, right? So I could already tell you one name I would have in contention, and I think we both have the same name in mind. But in terms of the race currently, I look at the MVP as the biggest contributor to their team's success on top of the stats. And if you take that person away from that team, how does that team look? And to me, it's Josh Allen. In terms of going into the season, there was a lot of talk. They traded Stephon Diggs away. And there was talk of, okay, the receivers aren't as good. They've got a good little tight end there. But, this is not as strong of a team going into this
They
year.
were going in with some pretty low, I wouldn't say low expectations, but there was a lot of question marks going into this season. You're absolutely right.
There was a lot of talk about the Bills taking a step back this year.
Yeah, I heard that.
And I remember too, there was talk of even if Sean McDermott was going to be the head coach by the end of the season, right? So I think you look at everything that's gone on there. I think Josh Allen's just taking that team on his back. And, it's very easy to look at stats and go, oh, well, Lamar Jackson has better stats than Josh Allen does. But I don't see Lamar, and I think he's a great quarterback. I think he's going to be one of those defining of an era quarterbacks. Like when you talk about Mahomes at the end, then you're going to talk about, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, all those guys.
Right.
But I think in terms of how key to a team's success, I think you have to look at Josh Allen. And so I see why Vegas made them, the betting odds favorite to win. What are the players? And I think I know the player that you're going to bring up here that should also be in contention. And I say this reluctantly because, playing off of the last segment, Texas Longhorns fan, I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan. So I say this very reluctantly, but I think Saquon Barkley's got to be in contention as well for the Eagles and just how well he's played for that team. I really do believe that if Saquon Barkley's not on that squad for the Eagles, they are not as good as they have been this year. Because there's been a lot of questions about Sirianni, and I certainly have my thoughts about Nick Sirianni, but in terms of just overall team performance, I think when you look at all the questions surrounding them, A.J. Brown seems to be something going on there. Jalen Hurts, something going on there. The guy that's kept this team together has been Saquon Barkley. And frankly, he's
definitely the most consistent player they had all year.
For sure.
Right?
For sure. And so he's somebody that if you took, again, going back to some of the criteria I look at, if you take him away, I think he's such a huge loss for that Eagles team. So I think he should be in contention. He won't win, but I could certainly see him getting votes. But, gun to my head at the end of it all, I think Josh Allen's going to win the MVP.
If you had to pick someone that wasn't one of those three guys, who would you pick?
If it wasn't Saquon or Lamar or Josh Allen, I saw Joe Burrow's name kind of being thrown around. If he brings his Bengals squad to the playoffs, I could definitely hear a case for him. That guy has been like, you look at the defense there in Cincinnati, and it's just been horrendous. The fact that they are even in a position right now to be in playoff contention.
Since I saw some better college football defense this last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
By far.
Yeah, this Bengals defense is not good. Not good. And that's been the question about this organization. Sometimes a really good quarterback can hide a lot of faults in your organization.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's gone on with the Bengals the last couple of years. Because Joe Burrow is before Joe Burrow arrived, the Bengals were in that same class of your
they
Cleveland
would win
Browns.
One game a year.
Exactly. They were the New York Jets. They were the Cleveland Browns.
Horrible.
They were, just not a good organization.
It shows me that even with a quarterback like Joe Burrow, which, look, I don't want to cut you off, but I'll let you finish your point about the NFL MVP, and then because I have a lot of emotions and a lot of things to say about Joe Burrow.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much what I wanted to say. Just Joe Burrow would be another person that I think is in contention, and I've seen him in the betting odds as well.
Right.
I would be more inclined for Joe Burrow to, get votes if he brings his Bengals squad to the playoffs. If they win this weekend and they move on, I could definitely hear an argument for Joe Burrow.
Right. So I agree. I think Josh Allen will win the MVP. I think he's the favorite. I think if you pluck him off that team, if he gets injured, and then you have to put in, who's the backup in Buffalo right now? It's
Boy, it was Mitch Trubisky a while back,
right.
but I don't think he's there. I'll search it up now, but
But
he's
honestly, it doesn't. I mean, I don't think the Buffalo Bills win 5 games without Josh Allen this season, right? And so to me, between the two odds-on favorite, and don't get me wrong, Lamar Jackson is a beast. Like, if Josh Allen has thrown, I believe his stats are, is it below 5 interceptions all season?
It's been hovering around that single digit
5,
mark,
right?
sure.
5 or 6.
5, yeah.
And that was a Josh Allen problem back in the day, right? Remember, he used to throw the ball away a lot and make bad decisions when he got pressured. He is definitely taken the Buffalo Bills on his back this year and said, I'm winning a championship. And that's why I love Josh Allen. That's why I love players like him, because he'll do everything to win. And I'll support guys like that even if they're not a Steeler. Like, I'm a Steelers fan. For those that know, like, my Steelers are my Steelers. But I love watching other football players other than Steelers. So Lamar Jackson, it'd be great to see him win 3 in a row. It'd be 3 in a row, right? Correct, right? This year, if he wins?
I don't think it'd be 3 in a row. It would be his third MVP.
His third
I don't think it's
MVP,
3 in a row.
right? So his third MVP. But at the end of the day, I think Josh Allen wins the MVP. Saquon Barkley will most likely. So here's the thing. So I was on you. I would agree with you about Saquon Barkley. He definitely is amazing. 2,000 plus yards rushing. He has been the most consistent player on the Eagles. He should get some votes. I don't like that he's sitting the last game of the season. I won't lie, especially with about 100 yards away from beating a record. But I understand why the game's not important. Rest your players, especially your running back, because you know if you're going to make a deep run in the playoffs, you're going to need that man. I get it.
Yep.
To me, Joe Burrow, like we've discussed, their defense is horrible. And if Joe Burrow is plucked out of that team, I don't think they win 1 game this season. So for me, I've always been a Joe Burrow fan since the beginning, even though Bengals division rival, like, I don't like the Bengals. I don't like the Browns. I don't like the Ravens. But I love Joe Burrow. I like how he plays. I also like how he didn't panic. He didn't change. He just decided that, well, if my defense is going to let 30 plus points every game, then I'm going to have to score 30 plus points every game. And that's kind of what he did for a while. Another player I would mention, and this is maybe out of the blue for me personally, and we saw during the season, he missed a couple of games. I believe he missed a couple. I might be wrong. But he's another guy that if you take him off that team right now, they have no heart, and I believe they don't win many games, and that's Baker Mayfield in Tampa Bay. I think Baker Mayfield is one of the best quarterbacks this season. The way he played, the energy he brings, I remember watching Baker Mayfield's first preseason game. I was on vacation and they were playing, I might be wrong about this, I think it might have been the Steelers. No, it wasn't. And I remember seeing him in the preseason. He played about the first quarter or the first half. I think it was the first half. And I immediately fell in love with that guy. I love how he played in college. I just like his attitude. He's another guy that'll give you everything every time he steps onto that field. I think he was a big revival of his career this year. And again, just being a fan of that guy, I'm not saying he's going to get any votes. I'm just saying, as far as being an MVP for his team, I think Baker Mayfield, for me, like, him and Joe Burrow in the same boat for me. It's like they won't get any nominations, they won't get any votes, but there should be a recognition of how important they are to football, for me anyway, as a fan, and to their team. And as much as we all know Josh Allen's going to win, I think there should be mentioned at least a longer list of names, right, that you can vote on, at least get these guys a bit recognized.
No, I that's an interesting name. I hadn't thought of Baker Mayfield, and I think that's a really great case that you've laid out there for him, because he really has been instrumental to Tampa Bay. And, making that transition from Tom Brady. And it's funny, like you would have thought, years ago, final year he was in Cleveland and then bouncing around between Carolina and St. Louis, or not St. Louis, LA.
Right.
The way that his career was going is like, man, it's just one of those first overall picks that didn't land, but he's gone to Tampa Bay and he's, put a jolt in. And I think it helps too. He's got some really good wide receivers. When you got Mike Evans there, it's hard to go wrong, but it's easy to say that. But you look at some of the, other QBs in the past, just with any team, and they have this all-star wide receiver, this all-pro wide receiver. They're just never able to fully utilize them and win games. So I think that's a testament to Baker Mayfield. So that's an interesting name as well. And they're a team that's currently competing to try and win their division as well in the NFC South. So very interesting name. I'll throw out this name as well before we move on.
Yes.
I would have never said this at the beginning of the season. And I was somebody that was a defender of his and thought he had a tough break when he got into the league. And he has just not had the best coaching behind him. But boy, talk about a turnaround season. I would not be opposed to Sam Darnold getting into the MVP
not at all
either.
Not at all.
So he's somebody that came in and I think it was just perfect. He was under the Kyle Shanahan system and learned it, knew the offense, went to a team in the Vikings that plays a similar style to that system under Kevin O'Connell, and he's been able to go in and get adapted to it right away. And like what we were saying with Tampa Bay, yes, he's got an all-pro receiver. In fact, probably the best wide receiver in the NFL, Justin Jefferson.
Amazing.
But the turnaround that he's had, he's looked like that first overall pick that he was destined to be, heading into before, obviously Baker got the first overall selection there, went to the Jets as the third overall selection. But he was looking at like that quarterback that was being projected to have a high ceiling. And they've been able to fully utilize his talents. And you look at Minnesota right now, like if it wasn't for Detroit and the way that they're playing, they're probably winning the division.
100%.
I think that's another name that should be in consideration.
It shows me at least the big difference of going from an organization that looks like they don't know what they're doing as far as managing players and managing expectations and coaching them in the right direction. When you have a guy like Sam Darnold that gets drafted by the Jets, that gets nowhere, then goes to the Carolina Panthers, another organization that seems to be destined to suck for a long time. And then you come to the Minnesota Vikings, you sign there, they draft J.J. McCarthy, which I think is going to be a stud in the NFL. And I thought was going to be the starter at some point during this season if he hadn't gotten injured. Now you have a situation where I've heard rumors of them thinking about maybe we should trade J.J. McCarthy, maybe we should put him on the market, maybe we should sign Sam Darnold for a long term. I think Sam Darnold, if you keep him in Minnesota, that system for him seems to work. The coaching, the atmosphere, the culture, that's what he needed to thrive. And I think you'd be stupid to remove him from that and have him jump to another team when he had such a good. I think Minnesota should roll the dice on Sam Darnold and sign him as their long term. And if they want to keep J.J. McCarthy and develop him in the back as the backup, you can do that. Or you could probably get some help either on the offensive line or as wide receiver or whoever and bring it to Minnesota and trade J.J. McCarthy. But yeah, Sam Darnold, I'm really happy. I finally get to see him play some good football. Let's move on to a different sport. LeBron James turned 40 last week. I'm still amazed that I get to watch this man play high quality basketball. In the GOAT debate, he is not my choice. I am a Michael Jordan for life type of guy. Right. I grew up, I became a fan of basketball watching this guy win championship after championship after championship in the 90s. I never saw a type of basketball that I remember watching as a teenager it's not the same game to me anymore, but I don't want to get into the debate. He's 40 years old, LeBron James. He's played a lot more games than Michael Jordan is. So the debate to me is kind of like, because I'm like, you get a lot more games to do something, you're going to break a lot of records. But how many more years do you think this man can play basketball and will play basketball. Because I think physically he's got 5 years left in him, but realistically, I think we might see him for max another 3 years. But I think within the next 2 years, I think it's going to start catching up to him, and it's going to be hard to keep this pace. He's played a lot of game already this year. Like, I don't really follow the Lakers. Maybe you could shed some light. I don't hear him sitting out a lot of games like I hear Joel Embiid and all these other guys that I shake my head and go like, I don't understand these athletes anymore. It really pisses me off, if I'm being honest, but I could spend a whole day talking about that shit.
Yeah.
What do you think LeBron James has got a few more years into him?
I think so.
Right.
With the NBA, it's funny because it's like, I used to be really hardcore, watch the NBA, I want to say 2000s to the late 2010s. But just in recent years, like my NBA viewership has just kind of gone down. Just with, as life progresses, what you want to watch becomes different. And, I was somebody that followed the Raptors. I'm a Toronto Raptors guy, so I was there when it was Chris Bosh and then moving on, and then it became the DeMar DeRozan, Kyle Lowry duo. And really what kind of started off in my mind, all the talk about load management in the NBA, really kind of you could trace it back to when Kawhi Leonard got traded to the Raptors.
100%,
and there was all the talk about his knee and how much he could play. I think a lot of that really kind of goes back to that. So, but as you mentioned, that's a different discussion for another day. But when it comes to LeBron James, like, it really is incredible. Just at a high level, as you mentioned, turning 40 and still putting up, 25 points a game on average. Like, for a guy, and especially the position that he plays, like more of the small forward, he's kind of been more of a power forward in recent years as well. But the position that he plays as well, we sometimes, with the GOAT debates, and I agree with you, I've always been more of a Michael Jordan guy.
Right.
I never watched Jordan live, but I gone back and watched highlights, and obviously The Last Dance has also kind of put a lot of people's thoughts on Michael Jordan as well. But I've gone back and watched highlights, and I still think that's probably the greatest basketball player to play in the NBA. But it's the longevity for me with LeBron that really makes him stand out for me, just at a high level, as you mentioned.
I'm just going to rattle out some stats there. I asked AI over here to give me the last 24 months of LeBron James. Right? 24.1 points per game.
Yeah.
7.4 rebounds per game. Field goal, 50.7%. 3.38.2. Like, assists per game, 8.9. So basically 9 assists per game. 40 years old now, and he's averaging these numbers. Like, it's amazing what taking care of his body. If I had to pick an example of an athlete to follow, if you want longevity into your career, I'd figure out what that fucking guy is doing. Because I don't think people understand how hard basketball is on the lower body. I've known friends that play basketball. It's not an easy sport. Look, football takes the top, obviously. Football there's nothing that comes close to how physically demanding a sport can be. Maybe outside of combat sports, but football is basically a fucking car crash. Every game you're in a car crash, and then you got a week to recover from a car crash, and then you got to go into another car crash. Basketball has become a game of how can I maximize my health? That's what it's been. And I've noticed that you have guys from different generations that just don't get it yet. Like Zion Williamson, which I was a huge fan of, but you could tell he just doesn't want to put in that extra work to make sure his body is built for basketball. He is the most talented and gifted player I've seen in a long time with the things he could do with a basketball, but he's always injured. So if you can't stay healthy, then you're no good to no one. And LeBron James has realized that, and it's a big reason why he has all of these records, because he's been able to play a lot of games every single season. So bravo for that. And I think realistically, again, he might have 2 years left to play high level basketball. And again, I think it all depends on if he's in the position to win a championship or not. But I don't think if he's in a position where he's still in LA and they're not a championship team and they're entering a rebuild in the next 2 years and there's no suitors for a team to go to, I think he just ends up calling it a career. He's done everything he's wanted to do. I think obviously he wants to win another championship, but I think it's going to be hard in LA, which kind of transitions me into my last question about LeBron. What do you think is his best chance of winning another ring? Is it stick with LA and try to make some trades this year and maybe sign some? Because I don't think they're a championship team this year, even if they make a trade. I want to get that. I don't think they might be able to trade for a huge player or bring in someone and maybe make a run to win a series in the playoff, but I don't think they're a championship team. I think there's teams in the East that are too strong, and even in the West, I think Denver and other teams. I think you got some championship teams other than LA.
Yeah.
But I do believe that they're not that far off, that maybe signing a big free agent in the offseason and making a trade this year and potentially building on that. But I think his best chance is that he gets traded to a contender next year, or he just opts out of his last year of his contract, which he does have that option in 2025, 2026. I think he needs to go to somewhere else, a place like Golden State, maybe team up with Curry and win that would make them immediate contenders, or maybe to, I don't know, the Knicks, New York, somewhere where there's potential there. But I don't think he wins another championship in LA. I think he's going to have to move on to somewhere else. And he said this week that he wanted to finish his career in LA. So to me, I think we're going to see him play 2, maybe max 3 more years. And then after that, they'll be deep in a rebuild, I believe, at that point. I might be wrong, but I think it's a little too late to win another ring. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I could totally see that argument of him, leaving LA and going to a team. I think for that to happen, he would have to accept that he would take a step back in his role instead of being the featured guy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's tough to tell an athlete, you're not going to be the featured guy anymore. We're going to have this guy be our featured athlete. We want you more in a supporting role. And when you're LeBron James and you've been that featured guy, not only for the team, but arguably for the NBA for many, many years, that's tough to tell a player, hey, you need to take a step back. So I think that's also one of the reasons why, he's somebody that will probably want to stay in LA, because he will still be a featured player. I know that the Lakers traded away D'Angelo Russell recently, and he was, a good player for them. So I think if he wants to bring in players, because LA still has that appeal, right? A big market team, and obviously the legacy behind the Lakers with all those titles, and you get to play in a franchise that had all these legendary players play for it, and now you get a chance to play with LeBron James. So I foresee him staying in LA and just kind of finishing his career there. I don't see him, jumping ship to Golden State or, one of those top contending teams, because again, I think that would require him taking a step back in his role. I know he's still playing at a high level, but I think they would want him to take a step back and have it more in a leadership role. But having said all that, I could see it. One of the things too that I think has gone under the radar is, we saw earlier this season, we saw the first father-son duo play in an NBA game with Bronny James. What's kind of gone under the radar is that his other son, Bryce James, also committed, not to USC, but he committed to Arizona, I believe.
Yes.
And so, that's because obviously with college basketball, very different. You could get out of college basketball within a year and then play in the NBA. That's what Bronny did.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that could also be another goal. Is like, hey, I get to play basketball with both my sons. Like I got them.
That would be crazy.
Got to play with both of them.
That would be crazy.
That would be also be part of a legacy thing for him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that I think has also be a factor, is that he gets a chance to be in the league while having both of his sons enter the league at the same time.
Right. I agree. I think he's a great basketball player. Like, he's in my top 3, right? I don't even have him second, if I'm being honest. Like, there's many reasons, and maybe in the future we can do an episode on the reasons why I believe he's the GOAT when it comes to why Michael Jordan is the GOAT and why LeBron James is not. But I even put Kobe Bryant in that same in the same talk, and because I think I saw him play, and it's a different feel. But anyway, it keeps me interested in watching him. But like you said, like maybe for his legacy, it'd be amazing if he gets to play with his other son. And like you said, he could be in college football for a year, and that's what Bronny did, right? And he didn't really have a great season. They just knew that the LA was most likely going to draft him with their second or third pick. So, which brings me to topic of choice. So I spoke to you before. I said, you're going to pick a topic. I'm going to pick a topic. I'll go first. All right. Sure. So I had a topic. I had something in mind. And then I was like, you know what? Right before this, I thought, you know what? That's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about something. I want to hear your thoughts more than my thoughts, again, because I'm out of the outside. Bill Belichick becoming the coach of North Carolina football team. I saw that happen. I believe the announcement was a couple weeks ago. Even the days before, when they started talking about it and it started making news, I was like, wait a minute. I was really under the impression that he was trying to get a job in the NFL. And then I started doing a bit, digging in a little bit more and realizing apparently he wasn't willing to give up a lot of his control that he wanted to build a team. So a lot of teams were hesitant to sign him on as the head coach. And I can understand that. And you're Bill Belichick, arguably the GOAT when it comes to coaches. You might want to keep doing it your way, right? I get it. It's the same thing we just spoke about when it comes to LeBron James, asking a guy like him to take a backup role. Like, you're going to be the backup quarterback while we have this guy going. And you're like, man, I'm LeBron James. You know who I am, motherfucker? Like, but at first I was thrown about, I was going like, I don't think Bill Belichick is going to be successful. And then I kind of listened. He spoke about it and he explained what his plan was. And it basically said that he was going to turn North Carolina into an NFL factory, basically, where players would come to learn how to play at the NFL level through his coaching, is basically what I got out of it. And at first I was like, well, that's a bit arrogant of it. Like, that's a bit, but then I go, he's the fucking GOAT. He is. And then I went, you know what? Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, to a certain extent, for a while, Nick Saban was the person doing that. Like, I remember at a certain point, Alabama's defensive line, I think there was the same thing with Georgia. A few years ago, I don't know how many guys the defensive line from Georgia got drafted, like in the NFL draft, but it was a crazy amount of guys. And Saban, the same thing. He built a lot of Alabama players got drafted under Saban because he had built that culture, that team. And now you're going to have Bill Belichick coming in and trying to a program that been basically in none of the storylines in recent years that I can remember. Anyway, I don't think North Carolina has won a championship or has ever made it to a championship game. I might be wrong about that. It might be before my time, but I don't think they're a program like Alabama and a program like a lot of these names we've been seeing. So what are your thoughts on him? And do you think he will succeed in North Carolina?
When I first heard that Bill Belichick was going to be the head coach of North Carolina, I was stunned. I thought for sure he was going to try and find a way to get back in the NFL. And like what you said, I think the big thing that kind of prevented him from coming back was that control. Because he's somebody that has that cachet to say, look, I want to control roster decisions. I want to control personnel. I want to have firm control of what gets put on the field. And I think he's earned that right to say that, obviously,
right.
and negotiate that. I think the issue with him going into college football is college football is different to the NFL in that you're not, going and trying to sign these big money deals. And I know with NIL, it's going to be a little different now. Now you're doing a lot more recruiting. And the visual to me of, Bill Belichick and some 16-year-old kid's home trying to recruit him into his program, it's like, we want you, like trying to entice him is just a very funny visual to me. I have my doubts because, like what you mentioned with Nick Saban went out just as this whole new era of college football was coming in. And Nick Saban is arguably, and I would say he's the greatest college football coach of all time.
Yes.
Just the long stretch of dominance. If Nick Saban had a tough time trying to figure out what this college football landscape was going to be, and he decided, you know what, this is not good for me, I'm heading out. I can only imagine what it will be like for Bill Belichick, who's coming into this, who's, you know, not a young spry chicken either. Like, he's in his, you know.
And by landscape, I think you mean with the whole NIL and signing players and going out and recruiting. There's been a shift in how things function in the last few years. And Nick Saban said, fuck this, I'm out. I can't deal with this shit. It's basically,
I'm done.
It's basically what he did, right? And
Pretty much.
And look, I'll be honest, he's great at what he does right now. Yep. Like, he's great at showing up on the Pat McAfee show, and he's doing all these things. But that was the GOAT. And if the GOAT said, fuck this, I'm out, because of all these new rules and this new way of doing things, I do agree you're trying to pluck Bill Belichick, the guy that probably the most hard-headed coach next to a guy like Nick Saban, and then you think that he's going to figure it out and make it and have success. Do you think he does it the smart way and hires the proper people to do the stuff that he's not good at and relinquish a little bit more of that power? Do you think that's something that he's going to realize, that he needs to be successful? Maybe he already realized it, or do you think it's going to be business as usual?
I don't think Bill Belichick would be going to North Carolina if he didn't have full control of what was going on with the program. So I have a tough time seeing him just relinquishing that control. Now, he could obviously seek out advice from people, and I'm not saying he's going to be like full bore, I'm not going to listen to anybody else, I'm just going to do what I want to do. But having said all that, like, I don't believe he would be joining North Carolina if he didn't firmly believe that he was going to be, you know, getting all the control around it, from again, recruiting to, you know, what's going to be on the field. And I also think too, a lot of it to me spells like, because his son Steve Belichick is going to be the defensive coordinator for the university as well. So a lot of it to me kind of signals that once Bill has done his time in North Carolina for how many years, it feels like to me Steve Belichick then comes in and he gets that head coaching role at North Carolina. So I think that's one of the reasons as well. That's why he's there, because he can establish a program. You know, he could get the guys that he wants in there and you know, produce these NFL caliber players. And then once he hits a certain age, because again, it's not like he's going to be there for 20 years. He's going to be there for, I think, max maybe 10 years. And that would take him into his 80s.
Right.
I see him being there around like 5 to 10 years. And then once he's done his part, he's got the guys that he wanted to do. He wanted to braid in. He's created the program that he wants. Then he can hand that over to Steve Belichick, and Steve Belichick can continue that program from there. So that's how I kind of view it. It's going to be tough. He is one of the greatest head coaches of all time. I'm somebody that was a defender of Belichick's, and I know people will say, oh, it was all Brady and whatnot. It's like, oh, it works in both ways, right? And I think people need to realize he was a pretty darn good coach in Cleveland and during the mid-90s. I know the record doesn't show it, but like you look at those Cleveland teams in the mid-90s coming off of the Bernie Kosar years, like, he got the most out of his team, right? And obviously a defensive coordinator for those Giants teams with Lawrence Taylor, like, under the Bill Parcells system, like, the guy knows how to coach.
100%.
So I've always been against that. I just look at it like with this new with what the landscape could be in college football and where it could go in the future. I think it might be a bit of a tough ride. I never would have thought I'd say this, but I think Deion Sanders being the head coach is a much smarter play than Bill Belichick being the head coach in college football. I want to make it clear.
100%.
Because the big thing that Deion Sanders has, and it might change because of the way that he's, you know, constructed his roster, is that he is such a good recruiter. He can bring in guys that he wants, and you look at that Colorado team and the improvement it's made under Sanders. Like, I think the transition, whatever happens to the landscape, I feel like Sanders would be better prepared for it than Belichick would be. But who knows? I could be wrong, and Belichick all of a sudden he's got, you know, goes to 3 straight national championships and gets himself back in the NFL. Could totally see that happen too, but I don't think he could connect with the modern players in a modern college football system.
100% agree with you. Before I get to your topic.
No problem. You try the hand. Sometimes if you do the hand thing in front of the camera, it makes it a little bit better.
I shut this. So stupid. Little things sometimes just throw me off with these cameras. I need a new camera. I'm not going to waste too much time on this because hit me with your topic of choice for this week's episode.
Sure. My topic of choice is more of I'm going to go to hockey. It's just been something on my mind. And, you know, as somebody that's kind of had a chance to go in the OHL and interview some players and whatnot, the World Junior stuff with Team Canada this year and just everything that's gone on with that program, I just wanted to, you know, have the chance to rant and rave a little bit about just the way that Team Canada went with its selection.
The floor is yours, my friend. Because you're not going to get anything hockey related from me. I saw the highlight. I'm like, what the fuck? Canada's losing to hockey now? I'm like, is this where we're at?
Not only losing to Latvia.
Yeah, when I heard Latvia beat us, I was like, no. I'm like, look, I don't pay attention to no hockey. I'll be 100% honest.
Fair.
Kind of after my Pittsburgh Penguins won their last Stanley Cup, I kind of zoned out. I was like, I only have enough time for 3 sports. I need to pick them 1, 2, 3: baseball, basketball, football, and then kind of hockey. I was like, I didn't have any interest. And the juniors and stuff, same thing. So floor's yours for this. But when I saw that we're losing to Latvia, I was like, what the fuck? Like, did we forget how to play hockey all of a sudden? Like, what's going on? So tell me your thoughts on this and where we went wrong, because
I can tell you where we went wrong. Team Canada got a little bit too cute with their roster selection. I think they wanted to try and fit into a certain mold. Head coach Dave Cameron, he's been coach for a long, long time. He's coached juniors before. He's currently the coach of the Ottawa 67s in the OHL. And the roster construction this year has just been like a lot of questions of some of the players that they brought in, mainly because of the players they didn't bring in. There are guys that are not on this team. Like, these are guys that were drafted first round, you know, top 10 picks in some cases, and some of them didn't even get invites to camp to be part of the roster selection. Guys like Carter Yakubchuk, the Ottawa Senators prospect, plays for the Calgary Hitmen, scored 30 goals as a defenseman in the WHL.
Jesus.
30 goals as a defenseman.
I don't know much about hockey, but if a defenseman is scoring 30 goals, he's pretty fucking good.
Yeah, it'd be pretty good. Too bad we didn't invite him to camp. Not even an invite, right? You know, there's been other guys like Michael Miza, who's a forward. I've gotten a chance to see some of his games as well. It's just a guy that's, you know, got exceptional status. So just to kind of help for the audience, if you get exceptional status in the OHL, that means at like 15, 16, they're like, you're so good that we are going to rescind the age requirement where you have to be 16 or 17 to play in the OHL just so that you can play in the league because we think you're that good.
Wow.
So Michael Miza got that, and I don't believe he got an invite to camp either to be part of this World Junior squad. You know, other guys, Zane Perrick as well, another player that he got an invitation to camp, didn't make the team. There's just been a lot of questions about what really went into this roster construction, because the big problem they had is just they didn't score goals. They shot the puck a lot. They really could shoot the puck. They could not score a goal to save their life, though. And you knew it was trouble in that Latvia game when, you know, they were shooting 50 shots on net, and they were only able to get 2 goals on net. And then in the shootout, when they were facing off against Latvia, not a single goal in the shootout. They went to 8 rounds in the shootout, and they could not get 1 puck in the net.
All right, I'm going to stop you there because I need to dissect this. So you got hockey players. All right, I get your laugh because it's fun. The stat is insane. You shoot 50, the puck fit. So I'm assuming that they weren't facing at the hot goalies, right? It's like how, and the thing that got me right now, you said they not a goal in the shootout. So what's keeping them from finishing? Is basically they can't finish. They can get into the zone. They can shoot the puck, get in position, but they can't finish. They can't score.
Correct.
Is it killer instinct that's missing? Is it just guys? I don't know much about hockey. Again, like the skills about hockey. Like, is there such a thing as a good hockey player but a bad shooter? Is that a thing, right? Someone that he hits the goalie all the time instead of being able to hit the corners or obviously the open spots.
Yep.
So is it a team full of guys that can't hit the open spot? What is it? Because honestly, like that doesn't make sense to me, right?
Yeah.
Because normally
Well,
you shoot the puck, something's going to trickle in unless you're facing NHL caliber goalies every night, but they're not. You're facing Latvia. Like,
Latvia.
tell them,
And
please.
good for Latvia. Like it's the biggest win of their country's history, but
Right.
it also is an indictment of Canada, like that this is how it kind of came to be. I think it's a combination of like they had guys that could shoot the puck and had been proven scorers in their leagues when they were playing. The problem is just like there's like a viral clip of Easton Cowan, who is a Toronto Maple Leafs prospect, in that shootout where he's literally like trying to like, you know, forehand, backhand, forehand, backhand, forehand, backhand, forehand, backhand, like 8-9 different times in front of the net, and then he shoots it and it just hits the guy's pad, right? Like you can't be making all that fancy stuff in front of the net only to just hit the guy's pad. Like it'd be one thing if he missed it, like aiming for a corner, but he just So it's stuff like that. And the other big killer for the Canadian World Junior team was that they were just so undisciplined. So undisciplined. They were just in penalty trouble all throughout. I think they averaged, I don't know the stat off the top of my head, but I know in the US game, they had 10 or 11 different penalties.
Wow. Yeah, you can't win games when you're in the box.
Exactly. And so it's tough when that's the case too. And they had in their their quarterfinal matchup against all of a sudden the team I've forgotten the team, but they also had a penalty in the last minute of the game, the last 2 minutes of the game, and the other team was able to score with 43 seconds left to give them the victory. So it's just there's been a lot of questions about this World Junior team. This is the second straight year that they were been eliminated in the quarterfinals, and this was supposed to be, you know, they're in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. Like this was supposed to be reminiscent of 2009 when Jordan Eberle scored that goal against Russia, and so this was supposed to be like the tournament where it's like, okay, Canada's coming back, we got a good roster, but now all the questions are, man, Dave Cameron should probably be let go as head coach, and the general manager that helped to put together this roster too should probably be let go because they've been answering questions to the media, and quite frankly, it's just not good enough.
Right.
Like what they've been saying. So I just wanted to give out about the Canadian World Junior team, because it's as somebody that kind of follows it as, you know, from the OHL side of things, not the whole CHL, but the OHL side of things, and seeing some of the players on that stage. It's obviously one of the bigger stages some of them will play in their entire careers, and just seeing them kind of lay a goose egg like that, it's just frustrating to see, especially when we're a country that's built on hockey so much, and they're just getting beaten by Latvia in the shootout. So
we seem to be putting out better basketball players the last few years through Canada that we are hockey players. It's like maybe we need to expand our money into a different direction.
Yeah,
that's all I'm
saying.
saying.
Our soccer teams are getting better too as well. So
soccer, basketball, a few football players, maybe.
Like, Curtis Rourke of the Indiana Hoosiers.
Yeah,
it's the quarterback for there, a Canadian brother of the Nathan Rourke for the BC Lions.
That's right. So that's right. I mean, look,
expand it out.
I feel you. I feel your pain. I don't follow this shit, but you expect Canada to be the best hockey team every time they go into a tournament. You're like, it's fucking hockey. We're Canadians. It's our sport.
We should be good at this.
This and curling, like shit, man.
Yeah.
There's ice on the ground 6 months out of the year. Like we need to be better at this.
Well,
brother, I appreciate this. What are you looking forward this weekend? What are you looking forward tomorrow? Watch some football?
Yeah, I'm a Cowboys fan, so I'm just kind of out of it now. Because now I'm going to see how Trey Lance will do, because it sounds like he's going to get a couple of reps. But I'll still be following along, obviously, because I'm just an NFL football guy in general. So I'll be following along. I'm very excited to see that Vikings-Lions matchup.
Yeah, that's going to be a game.
Really good.
I can't wait.
I cannot wait. That'll be fun. Yeah, I'll be keeping a look at the football stuff this weekend.
Even tonight.
I'm in Ottawa.
Right now,
even tonight, because it's Ravens are playing tonight as we're recording, and I think it's all the AFC North that's playing tonight.
Right, Pittsburgh is. I'm a Steelers fan, so me, it's tonight. Like I know the Bengals are in a must-win, so I'm like, and if it was against any other team, I'd be rooting for Joe Burrow. I want to see them in the playoff. And to be honest, like win or lose, Steelers are in the playoffs, and I don't think that. Right now it's 7-0 Ravens. I don't think the Ravens are going to lose to the Browns anyway. So
No.
the Ravens need to lose and the Pittsburgh needs to win if they're going to win the division. So I think we're going to just end up playing Houston in the end, which I think is a better matchup than I think we had the Chargers before. I forget who it
You're
was,
right.
So I think it's a better matchup for us at the end of the day. But I have a lot of strong feelings, and maybe we can discuss it after the regular season. I'm a Steelers fan, but these last 3 games, I've got some strong feelings about how certain players have been reacting, and I'm like, fuck, man. Like, there's certain patterns I'm seeing in the way they draft players. The Steelers, they're really good, but some of them need to grow up. Like, I heard somebody talk about how there's a lot of football players on that team. There's not a lot of professional football players on that team, especially on the offensive side. I think there's a difference between being a football player and a professional at your sport. I think there's a few guys on that team. I'm sure there's one name that comes to mind. I'm not going to name because I don't want to get started on him, but I think there's a few names that come to mind. One in particular that, like, there's some grow up, then you need to grow up really fast if you're going to be. I'm not saying you can't be a success in this league, but if you want to be a successful Pittsburgh Steeler, because you need to, grow up real fast. But I could talk about that. I'm looking forward to the game tonight. I really hope they show up against this Bengal defense that has looked horrible. I'll take a loss if they put up 40 points. If the Bengals beat them and they put up, Russell Wilson goes out there and throws 3 touchdowns and Najee Harris runs for 2, like, I'm all for that shit. You can lose the game if you want. You look like you could play some. You need this game. They need this game where they can just push the defense back and gain some confidence. Now, I've coached young athletes, and sometimes I'm like, this is a confidence game. This is where you guys get your confidence back. You're on a losing skid. This is a gimme right here. Throw the ball down the ball. George Pickens, it's like George Pickens will be open down there somewhere. Just chuck the fucking ball and let him do his thing, right?
Yeah.
I hope I get to see that later on tonight, but I'm looking forward to the end of the season. Again, thanks a lot for doing this with me. And again, I hope we can do this again real soon.
Yeah.
This is kind of a new project for me, Blue Collar Sports. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks, everybody. If you want to subscribe to the channel, SVG TV on YouTube. I'm Savage Paulson on Instagram. Zach McGibbon on Instagram as well, right?
That's right. Zach_McGibbon. You can find me there, and I'll keep updated with everything I'm doing. It seems like it's just nonstop with some of the things we're going on.
Right.
So keep a follow there. It's with everything I'm doing on, whether it be in sports or news or media. It's all over there.
Right on, man. So again, thank you, everybody, for staying along with us for this hour-long premiere of Blue Collar Sports, and hopefully we'll catch you for the next episode.